Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, where you learn about what's happening in the greater East Bay. I am your host, Jared Ash. Today, we are going to learn about an incubator, how that's helping the economy in the East Bay, and how it works developing cool companies that are being housed here, creating jobs, entrepreneurship, and capital. I am joined by Yolanda Chenko of Eyegate Innovation Hub and Daybreak Labs in Livermore. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Jared, for having me on the podcast.
Tell us a little bit about the labs and yourself. What is your mission?
Igate is an economic development nonprofit. We are funded by the cities of Livermore, Pleasanton, Dublin, the town of Danville, Alameda County Board of Supervisors, and Lawrence Livermore NC&D and National Labs to create a vibrant economy here in the Tri-Valley. The strategy we've employed is supported by research for the Confident Foundation for Entrepreneurship that suggests that the highest job growth rate comes from companies that are 6 years and younger, and the highest quality jobs measured all across the board, whether it's through STEM or business services or apprentice labor, comes from science-based startups. We are laser focused on delivering the mission of creating economic vibrancy here in the Tri-Valley by helping science-based startups succeed. And we do that through basically three initiatives. One is the physical place. Daybreak Labs opened in October of 2022, and its current location, we are in Livermore. We are a hard tech co-working space, meaning so we offer both lab and office space to early stage, that's seed and pre-seed companies that need access to both office space and business support training and lab space to de-risk their technology in order to get follow-on funding to hopefully scale and grow in our region. The lab space we offer is divided into a hard tech lab, a BSL2 lab, and a tissue culture suite. We support life sciences companies, climate tech companies, and deep tech companies. And we can host at any given time 10 companies. As I said, we opened in 2022. So we so far have hosted at the most 7. We are accepting applications right now, particularly for climate tech companies. And we've impacted, I think, the region. You can see in our last annual report, we've seen 11 companies come through here. We have seen 4 of them move out to relocate in the Tri-Valley, 3 of them in Livermore, 1 in Pleasanton, and 24 jobs created and supported. Exactly. There are 2 other initiatives that we do. You mentioned we have like about 10 companies at the most that we can host at a time. That's really not sufficient to create a vibrant economy here in the Tri-Valley. In order to support the broader ecosystems of startups, we have an initiative called Startup Tri-Valley that is not anchored to a space. It is primarily an ecosystem building and branding initiative where we are advertising to ourselves here in the Tri-Valley and the East Bay that this is a great place to start a scalable startup. And then also to the greater Bay Area. And we do that primarily through events and through content. So we have a podcast, the Startup Tri-Valley podcast. Our second episode of the year just dropped today. We talked to the head of the AI3 incubator at Lawrence Livermore National Labs, Brian Spears. And we have a series of events that we curate in 4 industry areas that we are really hoping to foster innovation: climate technology, life sciences, women's health, and artificial intelligence. And then the third thing that we do is we just announced an MOU to partner with Las Positas College to work together to create an innovation campus on the Las Positas College campus. Our first steps to doing that is through internships. We are having Train the Founder event where Christy Vanderhoof, who is the career services coordinator from Las Positas College, will actually offer a lunch and learn to help founders understand the cycle, the timing for getting summer interns. Las Positas College is unique. Some of those interns can continue to go through the year, as well as hear from a Daybreak Labs founder, who's been very successful in employing interns as an early stage company, but using them as a strategic pipeline for full-time employees that were literally as that he scaled his company, they increased their knowledge and were able to come on board as full-time employees after he had raised his Series A. He's going to be talking a little bit about that strategy. And then on the flip side, we're bringing founders to the college on April 30th in order for them to learn about the startups companies, what careers will be created in those companies, how they can prepare educationally, and what internships are available. Those are the three things that we do to support this vibrant economy.
Wow, I've got lots of questions there, but first tell us a little bit about Yolanda. Who are you and what is your background? How did you arrive at in this role?
It was a circuitous path, Jared. I never knew I was preparing for this job, but apparently I was for my entire career. My PhD is in bioanalytical chemistry. I had come from, my husband and I both had PhDs in chemistry, and we were coming from the University of Kansas. We had just done postdocs in the Netherlands. We were looking to relocate into the US, and there were very few economies. This is a long time ago. He's from Nebraska. I'm from Texas. At the time, there's still not a whole lot for two scientists in Nebraska unless you're going to both teach at a university. But in Texas at the time, there wasn't a lot either. And so we were looking at just a few centers that were Boston, Chicago, and the Bay Area. And we were just super fortunate. I had met someone at Sandia National Labs at a conference. I was working in a field called microfluidics, and it was very hard to do at the time without a strong engineering lab. I came out here for a postdoc at Sandia. My husband came with me, and he got a postdoc at Lawrence Livermore Labs. And I was working as a scientist and then manager at Sandia for 9 years and moved to industry, moved into essentially applied marketing in Thermo Fisher Scientific. And that's what I'd been doing for a while when I wound up working for a friend of mine's startup and running their marketing and sales. Again, this was a kind of a scientific instruments company. And it was right at the point of having digital tools becoming available for digital marketing that I was leading that part of their business, couldn't add headcount, basically set up a turnkey digital marketing platform for that company. And I was working part time at the time. We have two kids and they were in throes of parenthood. None of my customers could tell though, because of digital tools. That's how I was working. I got the idea at the time that I should start a company that I could help companies like the one I was working at. Did that side gig on my own until I got a customer that was in a non-competitive industry, demonstrated to myself that I could do this. And that was actually how I met the past executive director of Eyegate, Brandon Cardwell, like in 2015, when I went to start my own company and I was looking for space. Because my company was working in digital marketing essentially for scientific products, science-based products, I met my co-founder there. We started a company that was even bigger and better than what I had come up with. One of our verticals was life sciences, and got super sick of going to the Bay, South San Francisco, and Silicon Valley for every networking event. I saw a colleague had just floated the idea of a meetup group, East Bay Bio Network, and it was in Hayward. And I was like, done. I will go to anything where I don't have to cross a bridge. I mean, it was super successful. And we got to know each other through that event and wound up being a co-organizer of the East Bay Bio Network. I was telling Brandon about it and how great it was. He was like, you guys got better attendance than anything I've done here. So I didn't say that Igate was founded in 2010 and has seen a series of iterations. I was at a co-working space that Igate was running in Livermore. When I told him about it, he said, look, if you guys would do the same thing, make it focused on the Tri-Valley and feature life sciences companies, I'd pay for the food and drink. So we hosted the Next Tech Speaker Series, was hugely successful. That culminated in 2018 with the first ever Tri-Valley Life Sciences Summit. And we still run that through Startup Tri-Valley now. And over 100 people attended that event. And it just really demonstrated that the Tri-Valley in life sciences, particularly on its own, was becoming an important subregion, particularly in tools and diagnostics. And for that reason, and again, in 2018, turnkey lab space was actually a really big problem, especially for early stage founders. When you consider who we serve in the Tri Valley, we don't have an R1 university here in the Tri Valley. The founders that come in are coming at an inflection point in their career, which means that if they're trying to do something that requires lab space, they typically can't. You can't do what you can do at a university if you're a postdoc, which is do something on the side and use the university resources and license it later. Employers really do. Like they
Yeah.
own your IP. They own your IP and they're unlikely to license it to you. Whereas universities own your IP and are fine with licensing it. The model is really different. That need for space is really more obvious. And I volunteered my time with Brandon, helping create some space in our existing location where people could safely do some life sciences work. During the pandemic, what happened was those few companies that were still doing work in the lab, they still needed lab space. Every other company, including mine, working in the co-working space could work from home. That led Brandon as executive director and his board to draw the conclusion that when coming out of the pandemic, the need was met for a lot of companies that didn't require lab space. And the city public funding shouldn't go essentially to a need that the market is needing through things like WeWork, et cetera. And honestly, Starbucks, right? But there was a need that was going unmet that had to do with having more of this kind of specialized space and particularly at an affordable price where you're not having to sign 2-year leases. When they reopened with a built lab here in Livermore lab. That is when he invited me to apply, just because I have a unique background that I've actually at the National Labs was responsible for things like a BSL-2 facility and also had the sort of marketing background as well, doing the kinds of things that would need to be done to promote the region. And I was super fortunate that it was like my passion project was going to become my main project. My business partner from Founder Traction, Brad Oliver, he was super supportive, willing to buy me out so that I could pursue this. That's how I wound up here.
That's like a great story, though, that brings in your love for the region, how you found the region, just your scientific expertise. And yes, for those listening, she is a lot smarter than I am because I can't compete with a PhD in chemistry and bioscience here. I'll ask a question on that before I go back to the incubators. I have 3 young girls, 10, 7, and 5. What is your advice for young women in STEM or in science?
That's a good question.
How do I get them curious about things?
I'm struggling with how I even got curious about science. And I would say to you and any other parent for boys and girls is I think the thing that is so helpful is to encourage questions and to encourage independently seeking answers. When I was growing up, I had to go to the library if I wanted to know how something worked. People are very suspicious of letting young kids use any research tools, but certainly even really young kids can be supervised on learning how to do searches and most importantly, learning how to evaluate information. Is this a reputable source? Let's not search what AI pulls together for us. Let's go see what we can read maybe from a more reputable source. But I also think just reading. And the only reason I didn't lead with reading is I know there's so many ways to take in information now and so many different things are approachable. I didn't grow up being able to watch videos really easily, but now you can. When a kid is curious about something, just encouraging them to use every tool that's available to them to answer the questions that they have and to also not be afraid of things like kitchen sink experiments. If they want to try something, it's helpful to like go through, did you think about what would happen when you stuck that in the microwave? Let's think about that. How are you going to answer that question? What can you do? And encouraging them to take like the smallest step possible to answer their own questions. I think that's really helpful. I think that the most successful scientists I've ever met are both incredibly humble and incredibly curious. And they don't, they may at one point get the most expensive instrument, but they don't usually start that way. They start trying to answer questions in the simplest, most straightforward way possible with the resources available to them. And they start by doing research. Like this could be a question that's like one one well worded keyword search away and they don't need to waste their time trying to do experiments.
Now I do Google Lens, and so like, what kind of tree is that? But we were at the Exploratorium 2 days ago in San Francisco, the Hands-On Science Museum, and my 5-year-old insisted on this tool, and it's like a 5-year-old's Swiss Army knife. It has like a little digger, magnifying glass, a flashlight, and now there's 4 holes in my backyard, but she has found a worm, a mealworm, a grub, and, like, 2 other, like, little bugs, and she, like, puts them in her hand, and then she, like, uses the magnifying glass, and she's just getting dirty and exploring.
Yes. Yeah. And I think just reinforcing that, and it's easy to do when they're young. It's harder to do as they get older, and just continuously reinforcing the importance, not just the importance of asking questions, but that it's really okay. It's okay to ask hard questions. I think the gender issue comes more into play when I think really middle school and high school, and the sort of push to not be difficult, to be sweet, to be cheerful, to be all those things. And sometimes when you're in the grip of a really hard question that you want to answer, you're just trying to answer the question and you're not going to be worried about how you appear. And you might seem all the things that anyone would be if they were really gripped by curiosity. None of those things are the sort of stereotypical feminine friendliness that women are taught to project most of the time. And I think as your girls, especially, get older, letting them know that being passionate, frustrated, angry, obstinate, all the things that are also associated with discovery, but not as often associated with femininity, are a natural and normal part of being human and normal on the road to discovery. I think that's super helpful.
I wanna pivot back to the startup world here. How do you get the companies that you work with and bring in through the system, both through the lab and otherwise?
We find that the labs as a source of companies are high impact but low frequency. And it just really has to do with a lot of what the scientists working at the labs want to continue to work in the labs. What we do see is a lot more widely spread is scientists, typically scientists or engineers, but not always. It can be a business person as well, someone who's been working on the business side is at an inflection point in their career. Usually early to mid career, and sometimes even late stage career, where they really feel like that they're at a point where they can't, kind of that passion, they can't ignore this idea that they've had and they really feel strongly about it. Typically, these founders have had some work experience, so not coming straight from university, and really do have some kind of industry knowledge. And the way we typically find them is through our events. We host a lot of events at Daybreak Labs. We promote them pretty extensively on LinkedIn. And our events are designed to train founders. So the founders that are already here, but also the founders that we hope to see in our space. And we usually have a sponsor for the lunch and learn. We just serve pizzas and sodas and water. People can take a tour of the labs if they want, and they can have a nice chance to network with each other. The information pieces of our lunch and learns, we typically ask our speakers to try and keep it to about 15 minutes. It's mainly Q&A. And what we really find is it's the discussion that's so helpful to founders, and let's call them prospective founders, who are trying to learn about how they make the leap.
I wanna talk about the city role. You talked about 4 of the 5 cities in the Tri-Valley participate in helping fund your
Mhm.
organization. What percentage of funds are they giving overall to the organization? Because I know there's private funds and other stuff.
I did forget to acknowledge we do have a corporate donor. This, when I became executive director last year, is the first time we actually started to accept corporate donations to the organization as a whole. We've always had them donate to sponsors. I do want to thank Stanford Healthcare Tri Valley for being the first one to take the leap in investing in the Tri Valley's economic future in this way. The city of Livermore contributes the largest share. The cities as a whole contribute, and the county together contribute most of our funding. I would say about 4/5 of our funding comes from the cities and county, and then the remainder from the two national labs.
That's significant that the cities have really engaged and believed in it. And I'll talk about Danville, which may be a smaller piece of that revenue, but you're not incubating the companies in Danville. It's a largely residential community, definitely not in the lab space, non industrial space for manufacturing. But they see the benefits because I'm assuming that they get, if the region grows stronger and it creates more jobs overall, it benefits the Danville economy because people live here and they're not just isolated. They
Yes.
don't stop at the border. They know that people go work in Livermore and Dublin and whatnot.
Yes. And so we're really fortunate in, I think, the way the cities in the Tri Valley work together, which, and I will, I think, take the privilege of quoting Mayor Marchand, who sits on my board, which is a job created in Pleasanton, Dublin, Danville for someone in Livermore still means that there's a better quality of life for a Livermore resident. And I think every city feels that way. There's no way that you could have everything you need in each city, but with the region working together and providing fertile ground for innovative companies to start and succeed, it's going to lift up the entire region, whether it's because somebody moves to that town or somebody in that town no longer has a killer commute and can enjoy a better quality of life and also contribute more to the city. I think something that nobody really talks about as a impact of commuting, and this is actually a lot of why I'm so passionate about this, is seeing companies come out of the national labs and maybe not being able, the founder lives in Livermore, but they have to commute to Burlingame or something because that's where they found space. It's super frustrating. And what you lose when people have to spend so much time commuting is you lose their bandwidth and the bandwidth to do things like volunteer locally, whether it's for something like a commission for the city or just add something within your city where that depends on volunteers in order to succeed. Cities really depend, like all of us, our communities depend on people's ability to volunteer. And
Yeah.
when you're spending all your time driving, it's hard.
I want to use that example and come back to some of Contra Costa and some of Solano County, where I have a lot of listeners and to the politicians and economic development staff there. They're talking about what is making them strong is working together as a region. Not that Walnut Creek and Concord are in competition with Brentwood and Martinez. It's how can you all grow bigger together? I know there's the Diablo Valley Tech Initiative that's looking at some of that. And in Salado, it's not Vacaville versus Fairfield. A win in Vacaville helps the whole region. And give kudos to the city leaders in the Tri Valley for sort of understanding that and working together because they do it probably better than any other region in the Bay Area.
Right to hear. I feel really fortunate to have the support that I have from the cities, not just
Yeah.
through the members of my board, but the advisors from the cities that all come from economic development. So, yeah, they're incredible. Their
But
vision and execution is amazing.
on the other side, though, you do have something that the other areas that I just named in the East Bay don't have is you have two national labs. And we just had Berkeley National Labs on talking about how they work with startups. That's a big benefit. I guess 10% roughly of your funding each for 20%, but they're also giving you brain power, right? Talk about that
Absolutely.
relationship.
One of the things that is really remarkable about our region is the location of two DOE national labs, Sandia National Labs and Lawrence Livermore National Labs. And they are a little bit different in that they are National Nuclear Security Administration labs. It's a little bit different in that all the research that they do is not necessarily made public, but a lot of it is. And so they contribute in two ways. One is honestly as a talent magnet. They attract a lot of talented people, not all of whom will spend their entire career at the national labs. And it's really interesting because the podcast we just dropped today with Brian Spears, he talks a lot about that as much as they'd like to retain people for their entire career, the reality is they may not. And I think this is a unique advantage that we do have is that you have some incredibly talented scientists and engineers who come in the Tri Valley and they may only spend a fraction of their career at the national labs and then move on to the private sector. I will say, having worked at the national labs, the training that you get there, not just as a scientist, but even as a leader, is incredible. When I became a manager, the amount of training they invest in you is a lot. And it is incredibly useful. Moving into industry, I saw that the training I received at CND, both as a scientist and as a manager, the discipline that I was given was on par with what I was also getting at Thermo Fisher Scientific. I think that this is an amazing breeding ground for incredibly talented people they are stretched because of the technical challenge. It forces a kind of discipline and leadership that can be applied to anything, I think. And I think we are really fortunate, not just in the talent pool, but the kind of habits that get created by the environment of the national labs and the huge diversity of backgrounds. When people ask me what I miss the most about working at the national labs, it's literally that I was working with people who had so many different technical backgrounds. It was like being at a university. You didn't know how to do this kind of mathematical transformation, didn't matter. This person did. That diversity of talent and technical background is really an enormous strength for the region. And then also the people they bring with them. There are a lot of professionals here as a result of being married to someone who's at the national labs, and they also have unique talents and expertise and are often technical as well. I think that as a talent attractor, we're really, really fortunate.
That's a great advantage of the labs being here. I want to ask for 3 sets of advice towards 3 different audiences from you,
Sure.
given you have a unique perspective. First, somebody is a startup, whether they have an idea and they've created a plan. What advice do you have for startups at early stage startups?
There's actually a lot of material available, and it is hard to navigate, I'll admit. But I guess I would say for early stage startups, definitely for sure, if you're in the Bay Area, contact me. I mean, that's very helpful. But on your own, there's some really helpful starting places. So you can look at Lean Startup. Lean Startup is pretty helpful. It's not like the be all and end all of everything, but using Lean Startup and the Lean Startup Canvas model can really help you clarify your thoughts. I will say a lot of the startup models and advice are assuming a software startup. When you're working in hard tech and life sciences, basically at the edge in meat space where things work in the sort of three-dimensional world, a lot of the models from Silicon Valley break down. I would definitely do lean startup model primarily for trying to clarify what you think is commercializable about what you're doing, because that is where it is extremely helpful. And it really forces you to talk to who you think your customer will be before you formed your company or maybe immediately after. But before you've put a lot of resources into your company, the most important thing to do is to check your assumptions on where your market is. If you think you have a customer, it's super helpful to start talking to the customer before you formed your company and make sure that that's really true. And then there's another book that is super helpful called The Mom Test. And that is really helpful in helping you structure discovery conversations to make sure you're really solving a problem that people will pay to solve. I think that's actually probably more helpful than trying to figure out funding. Like everyone leads before they look. And the matter is that just, especially if you're a scientist, I think having treating your business idea with as much skepticism as you would treat a scientific idea, and coming and having to convince yourself that someone would really pay money for this product is is probably the best thing you can do. And the best way to test your assumptions and reveal your blind spots is to actually talk to somebody who you think would be purchasing the product. And even just trying to understand that. For example, you might think you have something that'll be great in pharma. Suddenly you have to analyze who is your customer, and just forcing yourself to do that with discipline and rigor and getting those conversations and hearing back will help you sharpen your understanding of the problem that people will pay you to solve. And I think that is the only way you can build a business.
I want to echo that. I work with a lot of business to government companies selling into state and local government. Think about it as, what are the city's needs? What is their pain point related to your specific, field or issue that you're trying to solve? Listen to them and then show them how your product solves that problem. You will have a much better sale than you just thinking your product is the coolest thing ever. And it's
Right.
really just, I think, echoes in a different way of what you were saying. Now, you work with a lot of government officials from those 4 cities. You talked about how they served on your board of advisors. If you're looking at other government officials throughout the East Bay or the Bay Area, what advice would you have for them about working with the startup community and helping grow their economies from your perspective?
One of our founders, Mateen Hanafzadeh, his company Rushnu is a direct carbon capture company, has a really brilliant way of putting it. For startups, time is the enemy. I think for public officials to understand that delays that developer could tolerate because they know that every project takes this much time, and there's a time constant built into how much money they're losing every day by not starting their project. That is factored into a developer. That is factored into a really large company. Really large companies have someone just devoted to real estate acquisition. This is something that's continuously going on. There's a team in a large company that can deal with all the bureaucratic hoops that have to be jumped through. And they might get frustrated, but it probably won't end their company if something that was supposed to take 3 months takes 6. You can end a startup with doubling the time on something. They can run out of runway. They can run out of patience. So you won't end the startup. They'll just move somewhere else until they are revenue generating, and they may not even be profit generating. Like, especially a hard tech startup, they're burning money every day until they get to a certain level. And if they can't make progress against their goals, and your city's base or whatever asset they're trying to work with you to use or acquire is taking too long, they literally can't afford to have that conversation anymore. That's I think that's my biggest advice is, for startups, time is the enemy. And as a city official, if you keep that in mind, you're much more likely to be able to foster the innovation you want to see in your city.
Advice to people who are starting other programs like yours, what advice would you give to them from your perspective and your experience in an
Just
accelerator helping companies grow?
We're very unique, so we don't take equity. We're not a typical accelerator. I would say the thing that you can do for companies immediately, and the way you choose to do it probably just depends on the kind of company you're trying to attract, is create a community for founders. We focus on early stage companies are very small. Sometimes they're starting with one person. Maybe they have some advisors. Those advisors are not with them every day. Even a 2, 3, 4 person company is an incredibly lonely place to be. You have to make a lot of very important decisions very early on in your company. Creating colleagues for your founders by getting them together, providing both information that's valuable, but an excuse to literally be in the same room with other founders and other people who can advise them so they're not having to make so many important decisions in a vacuum, I think is probably one of the most important things you can do. And it's not as hard to do as some other things. So just really focusing on helping your founders find colleagues, not necessarily co founders, just other colleagues that they can bounce ideas off of, experience from, just other companies that are a few pages ahead of them in the book is super helpful.
Yeah. Just as a solo entrepreneur and consultant myself, there are times where I need somebody to talk to and run something by other than my amazing wife. It's who understands what I do. Hey, this happened in this meeting. What do you think about that?
Right.
That's so valuable. And a mastermind group, so to speak,
Yeah.
so helpful to me. You talked now about some private funds. You talked about Stanford Health coming on board. Talk about how you're working to identify other sponsorships and other private sources.
I actually have a spreadsheet of a lot of, I know it's funny because I also have HubSpot, but still I have a spreadsheet. I have a spreadsheet of a lot of the companies in the Tri Valley and East Bay. I am reaching out to them. We are looking for companies, depending on their size, who are here in the Tri Valley and East Bay and who see the economic success of this region as being important to their success and want to give back to the community to make donations depending on the size of their company of anywhere from $2,500 to $25,000 to help us implement our vision. And our vision is includes supporting the companies at the incubator by giving them actual grants that allow them to have a little breathing space, especially in this current funding economy where you're not seeing IPOs and exits and you're also seeing the potential for government funding, which even founder investors will tell a company to go to the government, NIH, SBIR, DOE, SBIR to get money. One of our goals is to be able to administer grants to founders and to essentially to reduce that first check friction to make it easier for them to get even a pre-seed round, as well as continuing to put on some of the fantastic events that we're doing. So
What events? You talked about the lunch and learns and some other things.
we do have an AI and life sciences series that we have launched this year. Last year we had an AI series. This year we're launching the life sciences series. We actually were able to marry them together because AI is having such a strong role in life sciences. So our first event features how radiant oximetry is has created a digital twin so they can test ethically their novel, non-invasive fetal pulse oximeter that will prevent maternal death, honestly. We have a so that's on March 19th at Telco in Dublin. And then we also have a women's health event May 14th to really shine a light on unseen opportunity in women's health. We also do an AI summit in August and a life sciences summit in October. In between, we're hoping to have some more AI life sciences events where we can shine a light on what some of the incredible founders and companies are doing here in the region.
Wow. I definitely want to come to that AI summit. And I'm going to mention the women's health event to my wife so she can go and take notes so I can learn something. So, how did people find more information out about you?
Go to daybreaklabs.org to find out about what we're doing with Startup Tri Valley. We have startuptrivalley.org. And if you just want to learn about our organization as a whole, it's hub.org. All three of those are great resources.
Okay. I appreciate you being here, Yolanda. Okay. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, Jared. Thank you so much for having me here.
Wait, don't leave yet. Hit subscribe. Make sure you get the weekly updates. We have a new episode every Wednesday for stuff happening in the East Bay. In the meantime, follow me on LinkedIn, Jared Ash, or check out our firm where we have a weekly newsletter and blog at Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today on the Capstone Conversation.